The South came closer to winning the Civil War than most Americans realize. 3 critical moments nearly split the Union for good and changed the world forever. How close was the Confederacy to winning the Civil War? British Foreign Office documents reveal they considered formally acknowledging the South as an independent nation. Such a move could have broken the Union blockade and shifted global perceptions of the conflict. But how did these near misses shape the war's outcome? And what other factors played a role in the South's struggle for victory? These are the 3 moments where history nearly cracked, and the South nearly won. London, 1862. The British cabinet gathers in hushed debate as textile mills stand silent across England. Southern cotton shipments have stopped, and workers starve. The South's economy depends entirely on cotton exports, and Britain's industrial might relies on that same cotton, a lifeline connecting 2 worlds. Over 300,000 Brits lost their jobs due to this cotton famine caused by the Union blockade. British textile imports dropped by half. The pressure was immense. The Trent Affair nearly severed that lifeline. When Union sailors boarded the British mail ship RMS Trent and seized Confederate diplomats Mason and Slidell, Britain saw red. The London Times thundered, "No war of independence ever terminated unsuccessfully except where the disparity of force is far greater than it is in this case." Troops sailed for Canada. War preparations began. Recognition papers for the Confederacy were already drafted in Whitehall. Prime Minister Palmerston's pen hovered over them, ready to reshape history. Official recognition would have shattered the Union blockade. The Royal Navy could have swept Union ships from the Atlantic, and British ports would have legally supplied Southern armies. Imagine Manchester's idle factories roaring back to life, retooled to produce Enfield rifles for Confederate troops. Liverpool's docks, instead of sitting empty, might have bustled with ships carrying munitions to Charleston. The South wouldn't need to win battles outright, just endure long enough for British intervention to force negotiations. The Trent Affair revealed how close Britain came to intervening. British warships challenging the Union blockade in early 1861 could have changed everything. Confederate flags flying beside Union Jacks in London Harbor. European powers following Britain's lead in recognizing the breakaway nation. The geopolitical map redrawn before Lincoln could respond. Lincoln's team understood the danger. When the Trent Affair erupted, Secretary of State Seward worked frantically to defuse the crisis. The diplomats were released. Apologies were made, but the close call exposed the fragility of Union diplomacy. One more misstep could have brought the world's strongest navy into the war against them. In September 1862, the fate of the Union hung in the balance in London. Prime Minister Palmerston and Foreign Secretary Russell had actually decided to call a cabinet meeting to propose mediating the American conflict. A diplomatic first step toward recognizing the Confederacy as an independent nation. This wasn't idle talk. They had a concrete plan and were ready to present it. The timing is what makes this so dramatic. They literally waited for news of Lee's invasion of the North. They agreed that if Lee was successful in his Maryland campaign, they would immediately move forward with the mediation proposal. The British government was poised to act. They were just waiting for one more Confederate victory. When news of Antietam reached London, showing Lee had been turned back, Palmerston and Russell reluctantly shelved their plans. That single battle, which could easily have gone the other way, was the moment that prevented British intervention. An irony for Britain, who almost sided with a people who continued to use slave labor, even though Britain abolished slavery themselves decades earlier, all for economic prosperity. For a moment, the fate of the Union hung by a thread stretched taut across the Atlantic. But while Britain nearly tipped the scales, America's next crisis would be decided not abroad, but at the ballot box. Washington, August 1864. The war had dragged on for over 3 years, and the cost was staggering. Families were losing brothers, fathers, and uncles. Across the Union, families were asking the same question. Was this bloodshed worth it anymore? Anti-draft riots had rocked New York the previous summer, leaving over 100 dead. Northern newspapers printed daily columns of fallen soldiers' names. The nation was weary, and Lincoln felt the weight of it. That August, he penned a secret memo predicting his own defeat. The words, penned in Lincoln's own hand, reveal his desperation. Washington, August the 23rd, 1864. This morning, as for some days past, it seems exceedingly probable that this administration will not be re-elected. Then it will be my duty to so cooperate with the President-elect as to save the Union between the election and the inauguration, as he will have secured his election on such ground that he cannot possibly save it afterwards. He had his cabinet sign it blind, committing to cooperate with the President-elect between the election and inauguration. Lincoln wasn't just worried about losing power, he was acknowledging that McClellan would negotiate peace with the Confederacy. The Democrats saw their chance. They nominated George McClellan, Lincoln's former general, with a simple slogan, "The Union as it was, the Constitution as it is." This meant one thing, peace negotiations with the Confederacy. McClellan promised to stop the killing and bring the boys home. The 1864 election revealed how fragile democracy can be during wartime. As the Civil War raged, Lincoln needed 118 electoral votes to secure victory. His actual margin? A mere 75,000 votes across 5 crucial states determined the outcome. In New York alone, a shift of just 7,000 votes, fewer people than can fit in Madison Square Garden, would have changed the outcome. Had those votes shifted, the America we know today might not exist. The Confederates understood this better than anyone. General Lee wrote to his wife in 1863 that one more successful Confederate campaign could break Northern morale. Jefferson Davis called the election the South's last best hope. They didn't need to win the war outright, just make enough Northerners believe it couldn't be won. Picture September 1864 without Sherman's capture of Atlanta. Instead of cheering crowds celebrating the city's fall, Northern newspapers report another failed campaign. Without this victory, Lincoln's campaign manager warned he would lose the election. The Democratic New York World declared, "Peace is the only remedy now." McClellan's victory would have meant an immediate armistice, recognition of Southern independence in exchange for an end to the war. The Confederacy would have achieved its founding purpose, to exist as a separate slaveholding nation. The South came within weeks of this outcome. Sherman took Atlanta on September 2nd, just in time to shift public opinion before November. Had Atlanta held out another 2 months, the election results might have been very different. Lincoln won 55% of the popular vote that November, but the margin was closer than you think. In today's terms, it would be like winning the presidency by less than 1%. The Union clung to critical states like Pennsylvania and Indiana by thin margins. In these contested territories, soldiers stood guard at polling stations, not just fighting for democracy on distant battlefields, but protecting its very practice at home. Yet Lincoln's electoral victory, however narrow, only solved half the equation. While the Union had secured a fragile mandate at the ballot box, the Confederacy recognized a different path to victory. They didn't need to win elections, they simply needed to outlast Northern resolve. Each passing month of stalemate strengthened Southern hopes that war-weary Northern voters would eventually surrender to exhaustion what they wouldn't concede on the battlefield. The South didn't need to win, just not lose, and they had the perfect terrain, manpower, and tactics to pull it off, if only they had used them. The Confederacy had overlooked advantages in this kind of war. Southern soldiers fought on familiar terrain, knowing every creek bed in Tennessee and every mountain pass in Virginia. Imagine a game of cat and mouse. Confederate cavalry striking Union supply wagons deep behind enemy lines, shadowy partisans ambushing blue-coated patrols in Mississippi swamps. This was the war Robert E. Lee refused to fight, one of raids instead of grand battles, of armies that vanished into the landscape rather than charging headlong into enemy fire. What if the South had embraced this strategy? No Gettysburg, no Pickett's charge, just relentless harassment, bridges blown, railroads torn up, Union troops constantly on edge, never knowing where the next attack might come. The Confederate government even melted down church bells to make bullets, a stark symbol of their resourcefulness under pressure. Joseph E. Johnston proposed a strategy built for this kind of war: dig in, force the Union to attack fortified positions, then slip away if outflanked. His plan boiled down to one rule: don't lose until the opponent quits. But Davis replaced Johnston before the plan could take root. Instead, the South fought the North's kind of war, battle after bloody battle, draining their limited resources. Some Confederate units, like Mosby's Rangers, showed this worked. These tactics frightened and demoralized Union soldiers, a phenomenon which came to a head in 1863 with the formation of Colonel John Singleton Mosby's 43rd Battalion Virginia Cavalry, a partisan Ranger band. Known as the Gray Ghost, Mosby defied Union troops stationed in Virginia for 2 years. So incapable were the Federals at putting a stop to Mosby's activities that by the end of 1863, Northern Virginia and the Shenandoah Valley became known as Mosby's Confederacy. But the strategy was never scaled. Guerrilla tactics could have shifted the balance. A single sniper could demoralize Union troops as effectively as a full engagement, but at a fraction of the cost. Confederate soldiers, hunters, and farmers who knew the land intimately had the skills to make this work. Union troops, by contrast, struggled to navigate Southern backroads. Fully embracing irregular warfare might have meant Sherman's army never received the supplies it needed to press forward. The South's failure to commit to guerrilla warfare left them fighting a war they couldn't win on terms they couldn't afford. By fighting the North's war, the South may have thrown away its only chance to win. What most history books miss is just how close the Union came to collapse. Britain nearly joined the war, Lincoln nearly lost the presidency, and the South nearly chose the right strategy. Each of these moments was real, not speculation, and each one could have left us with two rival Americas, each claiming the true inheritance of 1776. So which one do you think came closest to rewriting history? Drop your take in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the pivotal moments where history nearly took a different path, hit subscribe and join us on the next Quantum Trail, where we'll explore another moment that changed everything.